There are two valuable things to consider when snare drum tuning, and those are firstly to make sure that the drum heads are both tuned evenly so they can vibrate smoothly and powerfully, and also that the two drum heads are tuned sensibly relative to each other. And the second thing is to tune for personal preference. So most drums actually sound good at a number of different pitch frequencies. So it's down to you personally to experiment and listen to your drum at a number of different frequencies to decide exactly what suits your personal preference and the style of music you're playing. So we'll explore some of that in this video. I'm using a beautiful Broize solid oak drum here, snare drum 14-inch. 6.5 inch depth with a Remo black dropped drum head, and this drum I know sounds great at a number of different frequencies, tuned low so it sounds warm and powerful, or tuned high so it's got more cut and snap to it, and so we can listen to that in a couple of different settings. So first thing I'm going to do, as I do with all drum tuning, is start off with the lugs completely loose and tighten them purely with my fingers to what we call finger tight. So every single lug totally to the tightness that my fingers will allow, and that way I can be pretty sure they're all fairly evenly tensioned. And then at that point I know it'll still be too slack, so I'm going to give a half turn on each lug, so 180 degrees on every single lug in a crisscross star form or crisscross formation, so that I'm tuning one side and then the other. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 lugs all tensioned in a very similar way. And now I'm just going to do exactly the same on the resonant drum head. So again, these are all totally slack, and I'm now just tuning them with my fingers, or tightening them with my fingers to make them finger tight. That one's a bit loose, so just about there. Okay, and same thing. I'm going to tune each lug a half turn, 180 degrees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I can be pretty sure that's still too low, but let's have a quick listen to it. First without the snares on. Sounds very low, it's boomy like a floor tom or like a rack tom. The snare on, it's got a lot of boom, a lot of sort of uncontrolled vibration. It's because the drum heads aren't really tight enough. But anyway, just out of interest, let's just see what frequency that is vibrating at. So in pitch mode on iDrumTune, take a reading from the center. It's 114 hertz, which is really low for a snare. I know that this snare and most 14-inch snares sound great between about 160 to 200 hertz. Some will go a bit lower, some will work a little bit higher, but between 160 and 200 hertz for a 14-inch snare sounds great. So let's tune it up to around 160 hertz, which should start to sound good at that point. So I'm going to just give it another quarter turn this time on each lug. 2, 3, 5, 6. Now I'm going to do the same on the resonant head as well, and the reason for that is because the two drum heads vibrate together and they move up and down together, and so whatever I change on the top will change the pitch, but if I change the bottom, that'll change the pitch as well. So if I want to move up in pitch, it makes sense to do something to the top and to the bottom equally, so we keep those two drum heads about the same sort of relationship. So I'm just going to do a quarter turn on the bottom as well. So 1, 2. Okay, so let's see how that's sounding and what pitch that's at now. Okay, that's up at 158 Hertz. So that's around the 160 I was aiming for. Let's hit it with the snare on. Okay, it's starting to sound like a pretty meaty snare drum, which is great. And to be honest, that sound, I could live with that. That's a pretty good drum sound with having done not much in terms of tuning. Okay, at this point, let's just talk a little bit about the acoustics of the drum. So I'm just turning the snare wires off. And the reason is because it's much easier to evaluate and analyse the vibration of the drum heads or the pitch of the drum heads with the snare wires off. The idea of the snares is to actually confuse the sound and to create this sound that cuts through a track. Well, that's great in a track and the way we play, but for tuning, it's actually much better to let the drum heads vibrate freely. And then from day to day, we can make a judgment on whether they're tuned correctly or whether they're tuned the same as they were yesterday or whatever. So I'm just going to go into the spectrum analyzer mode because it's valuable now to see the difference between the fundamental at the center and the overtone at the edge. So let's take a reading at the center. There we go, we see the fundamental, 159 Hertz. We take a reading at the edge. And there we see the strongest frequency is the edge frequency at 249.5 Hertz. And we can actually see if I hit it a little bit in between the two, that they're both excited quite nicely there. So the center frequency is 158 Hertz and the edge frequency is around 250 Hertz. Well, at this moment, it's useful to maybe check that the lugs are all tuned the same so the drum is vibrating evenly at every position around the edge. So we're interested in the overtone at the edge, that 250 Hertz frequency. So I'm going to go into lug tuning mode and set that to 10 lugs, because that's what there are on this drum, and take a reading. Okay, 254. That one's a little bit lower, so I'm just going to go around the drum. Okay, so now I've got a reading at every single place on the drum and at every single lug, and I can see that the second and third lugs are tuned a bit lower, 3.5 Hertz and 4 Hertz lower, and then the next three are green, they're all very close within 0.5, and then the next three are a bit lower as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tune those low ones up, just a touch, not a lot, and I'm going to tune the others down a little bit, so they kind of try and meet in the middle. So we try and find a place where the low ones come up a little bit and the others go down a touch. So I'm talking really fine numbers now. So so the second down a little bit, third, sorry, up a little bit, and the third up a little bit, and then this one up a little bit, this one up a little bit, and this one up a little bit. And then the others I'm just going to nudge down a little bit. So very small amounts. And now we can take another reading. Okay, so we can now see that it's actually changed that a little bit. We've actually taken those a bit higher and the others a bit lower. So they're now all within a bit closer. I could even that out a lot more if I wanted, just by going around again, a few more fine adjustments to the point where they're all really close. But if they're within 1 or 2 Hertz, then we're starting to get really close and we can be sure that the drum's vibrating really quite smoothly. I would spend more time on that, but actually I want to listen to the drum as we take it up a few more notches, and then we'll come back to this side of things. So let's go up a bit. So we're at 160 hertz, and I'm saying I want to try and get up to 200. Well, let's make another adjustment, get somewhere in between, maybe around 180 hertz. So we'll do another quarter turn. And again, on the underside, quarter turn on every lug. And let's have a listen. So now we're up at 183 hertz. That's what it sounds like with the snare off. Starting to sound quite cutting now, which is great. It's got a good solid tone, but it also can slice through a sound in a mix, I suspect. But anyway, I think we can take this a bit higher. So if that's the sound you like, that's great, but it's great to know the range of your drums and the options you have to play with. So we'll go another quarter turn. See if we can get up to about 200 hertz. And again, on the underside. Okay, let's see where it's at now. So it's now bang on 201 hertz. 203 hertz. It's a tiny bit of variation there. So a couple of hertz variation, what that generally means is that perhaps the lugs aren't all perfectly equal again. We've tried to keep them as equal as possible, but they're probably not quite there. Let's have a listen just with the snare on. Okay, that's starting to sound really quite cool. That would certainly suit a rock and roll kind of performance or band. Okay, so that's shown the range of that drum. I suspect we could go a little bit higher even as well. And you have to be careful just to make sure you get a good feel for when the heads are starting to get to a point where they're kind of putting more pressure on them than you want to. If you go too high, then the heads sort of stop vibrating because they kind of choke themselves. But you can get a little feel for that. Obviously don't go further than you need to, otherwise the heads can actually break. So you need to know the ranges, but 200, maybe a little bit higher is possible. And that shows how great the sort of range of this drum is, and you'll have to experiment with how that sits in your kit as to whether you want it tuned low at 160 or higher up at 200. But the great thing is it sounds good. It sounds good in all areas.